What if everything you thought you knew about a people, a place, a faith, was shattered in a single moment of raw human connection? What if in the middle of war, under the shadow of drones and rubble, you didn't find hate, but hospitality? What if the most life-changing act of love didn't come from a place of privilege, but from a family who had lost everything, yet still gave you their heart? This isn't just a story about Gaza. This is about faith that cannot be bombed, about love that cannot be silenced, about children who smile through sorrow and strangers who become family in the most unlikely of places. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you won't just see Gaza differently. You'll see yourself differently, and maybe, just maybe, your heart will never be the same again. Let's begin. Amid the chaos and devastation that has gripped Gaza for years, stories of suffering often dominate headlines. But sometimes in the heart of tragedy, a quiet act of compassion redefines everything. The first key note, unexpected compassion in crisis, is rooted in the profound truth that even in the darkest places, human kindness can shine brighter than any bomb, any bias, any narrative shaped from afar. In war zones, the instinct of self-preservation is natural. Families cling to food, safety, and any shred of security they can find. Resources are scarce. Emotions are frayed. Every day feels like survival. Yet in the midst of this survival, there exists a level of generosity that transcends logic. A Muslim family in Gaza, barely making ends meet, chose not to close their door to the world, but to open it wider. To a stranger. To someone who may not have shared their faith, language, or experience. That act of kindness becomes more than hospitality. It becomes defiance against hate, fear, and hopelessness. What's most striking is that their compassion didn't come from abundance. It wasn't the result of privilege or comfort. It was the kind that flows from a deep-rooted belief in mercy, in community, in faith. The Quran teaches the importance of helping the traveler, feeding the hungry, and honoring the guest. And this family embodied those teachings not through sermons, but through bread, warmth, and open hearts. For someone who had never seen Gaza beyond media portrayals, this encounter could shatter preconceptions. Where one expected bitterness, there was grace. Where one expected desperation, there was dignity. This unexpected compassion becomes transformative. It forces an internal reckoning. It reveals that what we often call the other is in fact profoundly familiar. They laugh, cry, worry, and hope just like anyone else. And when they give, it's not from what's left over. It's from what they believe is right. There is a sacred kind of love that exists in these moments, unspoken, powerful, and deeply human. In a place surrounded by smoke and sorrow, that love, offered freely, without judgment, has the power to change not just minds, but hearts. It's not just the act of giving that makes it remarkable, it's the timing. When the world is at its worst, and someone chooses to be their best, that moment becomes unforgettable. Faith is often tested most severely in times of unimaginable hardship. And nowhere is this more evident than in the lives of those enduring the devastation in Gaza. The second keynote, of faith amid destruction, speaks to a spiritual resilience that defies human logic. When homes are turned to rubble, loved ones are lost, and the future is uncertain, one might expect despair to take root. But in Gaza, among many Muslim families, faith doesn't disappear. It deepens. It becomes the very thing that carries them through. The family at the heart of this story had lost everything material. Their home was gone, their neighborhood reduced to ash, their basic needs now daily struggles. But the one thing they had not lost was their connection to Allah. Their prayers whispered amid ruins were not filled with rage or revenge, but with surrender, hope, and trust. This kind of faith is not loud or performative. It's quiet, grounded, and unshakable. It is the belief that Allah sees all, knows all, and that every test carries wisdom, even if that wisdom remains hidden for now. It's hard to understand such conviction unless you witness it. Imagine a father who has no idea how he will feed his children tomorrow, yet rises before dawn to pray Fajr on a bare floor. A mother who recites Quran beside the broken wall of what was once her kitchen. Children who say Alhamdulillah for dry bread and water. This isn't just routine. It's survival of the soul. Faith becomes the oxygen in an atmosphere poisoned by grief. This resilience is not passive. It doesn't mean they don't feel pain. On the contrary, they grieve deeply. But their grief is wrapped in the belief that Allah does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear. It's this belief that allows them to keep going, to find meaning even in tragedy, and to offer love and dignity to others in the midst of their own suffering. Their destroyed surroundings contrast sharply with the strength in their hearts. While everything around them screams despair, their faith whispers, "This too shall pass. Allah is with the patient." And that whisper is louder than bombs. This is what makes their faith so powerful. It is not dependent on comfort. It thrives in the absence of it. Humanity often becomes obscured by borders, beliefs, and the biases we inherit without realizing. The third keynote, humanity beyond labels, is a realization that strikes hardest when personal experience overrides public narrative. The speaker, like many outside of Gaza, likely grew up hearing filtered stories shaped by media, politics, or fear. Muslims, especially those living in conflict zones, are often reduced to headlines. A militants, a refugees, a casualties. Rarely do we hear their names, see their smiles, or understand the richness of their lives. That's what makes a face-to-face encounter with a family in Gaza so transformative. Meeting that family doesn't just change opinions, it breaks illusions. Suddenly, the enemy becomes a father who teaches his son how to tie his shoes. The other becomes a mother who wraps her daughter's hair before prayer. A child who moments before seemed a symbol of suffering becomes a storyteller with dreams of becoming a doctor. These people, who had once existed in distant headlines, now exist in the heart. The false line drawn between Yusuf and them begins to blur and then dissolve completely. This family did not offer explanations or justifications for their faith or their struggle. They simply lived with honor, kindness, and sincerity. Their hospitality wasn't a performance. It was their nature. Their respect wasn't conditional. It was a reflection of their belief in shared human dignity. And in showing this, they revealed something sacred. That identity is not a barrier but a bridge if we are willing to cross it. The speaker, standing in the middle of Gaza, surrounded by destruction, was not met with anger, suspicion, or rejection. Instead, they were embraced. They were offered tea. They were invited to sit, to listen, to be seen. Not as an outsider, not as a foreigner, but as a fellow human being. This acceptance challenged everything they thought they knew. It shook the foundations of any prejudice they may have carried, even unconsciously. What happens in that moment is not just a shift in thinking, it's a shift in the heart. The walls we build through fear and misunderstanding come down, brick by brick. That family didn't preach tolerance, they practiced love. And it's in witnessing that love, so freely given amidst such chaos, that one finally sees the truth. Our humanity is not defined by nationality, religion, or language. It's defined by how we treat one another when we have every reason not to. In a place where bombs fall and sirens wail, the last thing one expects to find is love. Yet that is exactly what makes this keynote, a love in a war zone, so profound. The contrast is almost too much to grasp. Gaza, a land too often associated with suffering, becomes the stage for a kind of love that is so pure, so generous, it forces a reevaluation of everything we think we understand about strength and humanity. When buildings collapse and food is scarce, when loss becomes routine and safety a fantasy, what kind of people still choose to love openly? The answer reveals a level of emotional courage that transcends survival. It embodies grace. This love doesn't wear makeup, it doesn't pose for cameras. It's not a slogan or a trending cause. It is found in the smallest, most powerful acts. A mother gently brushing dust off her child's cheek. A father shielding his family during an airstrike with nothing but his arms. A grandmother sharing her last piece of bread with a neighbor who has less. This love is quiet but unbreakable. It is rooted in faith, yes, but also in culture, in memory, in an identity shaped by resilience and tenderness intertwined. To witness such love is disarming. The speaker, likely shaped by images of Gaza as a war zone and Muslims as distant or hardened, finds that narrative undone by a simple invitation to sit, to eat, to talk. The war doesn't disappear, but for a moment it pauses. In that pause, humanity returns. A small table with chipped plates becomes a sanctuary. Laughter bubbles up even as drones buzz overhead. And for someone who thought love only existed in comfort, witnessing it in the rubble feels like a revelation. What becomes clear is that love in Gaza isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It is how people hold on to their identity, how they resist being dehumanized. It's how they heal without ever stopping to grieve. It's how they raise their children not to hate but to hope. And for someone who enters that space carrying even the faintest bias, the sight of love surviving where it shouldn't even exist becomes impossible to forget. That kind of love doesn't need to be explained. It just needs to be seen once to change someone forever. There is something profoundly unsettling and beautiful about seeing children smile in the middle of destruction. The fifth key note, children who still smile, is not just an observation, it is a challenge to the soul. In Gaza, where war is not a headline but a daily reality, the image of children laughing, drawing on broken walls, kicking a deflated football across a dusty street, is not just a symbol of innocence, it's a lesson in endurance. These children are surrounded by rubble instead of playgrounds, silence instead of lullabies, and yet they continue to dream, play and smile with a kind of defiant hope. One might expect children in such circumstances to be hardened, withdrawn, or fearful. And indeed, many carry invisible scars too deep to see. But what catches the visitor off guard is not their trauma, it's their joy. It's the way they laugh with their whole chest, chase each other through alleys with no shoes, or show off a drawing made with broken crayons like it belongs in a museum. That joy is not ignorance. It's resilience in its purest form. These children have learned to find light in the darkest corners, to create normalcy in the middle of chaos, to hold on to laughter like it's a form of survival. The speaker, likely entering Gaza with a heavy heart and a head full of sorrowful images, is undone by this joy. The children don't just survive, they live. They ask questions, they tell jokes. One might climb into the speaker's lap without hesitation, offering a flower made from scrap paper. Another might ask, with eyes wide and unflinching, if the world knows what's happening to them. And then, without waiting for an answer, they'll go back to skipping rope or calling the Idhan in a voice full of pride. That smile, come a face that has seen far too much, is what stays with you. It haunts and heals at the same time. It makes you question how something so pure can exist in a place that has been so torn. And yet, it does. These children are not symbols. They are human beings with hearts wide open. Their joy is not naive. It's revolutionary. It refuses to be buried under rubble. It forces the world to look again, to feel again, and maybe even to change. A personal awakening represents a turning point in the speaker's journey from passive observer to deeply changed individual. It is not sparked by grand speeches or intellectual debates, but by something far more intimate, an encounter with reality that challenges every assumption previously held. Before stepping into Gaza, the speaker likely carried unconscious biases shaped by years of filtered media, geopolitical rhetoric, and cultural distance. Muslims were perhaps viewed as distant, as different, as a people defined by conflict rather than compassion. That illusion does not survive a single heartfelt interaction with a family who has lost everything yet offers everything they still have. The awakening begins subtly. It could be in the way a father's hands shake while pouring tea, not from fear but from determination. It could be in a child's voice reciting the Quran over the ruins of their school. It could be in the quiet dignity of a mother preparing food she cannot afford, simply because there is a guest in her home. These moments pierce the fog of misunderstanding. They bring clarity not through argument, but through the undeniable presence of truth. There is a quiet shame that often accompanies awakening, the realization that what you thought you knew was never the full picture. The speaker begins to see the gap between media portrayals and human reality. Gaza is no longer a place defined by statistics and sound bites. It is filled with names, stories, emotions, and souls. That shift in perception is irreversible. It is not just empathy that is born, but a kind of moral responsibility. Once you have seen a people's strength, heard their pain, and felt their love, neutrality is no longer an option. The awakening isn't just about understanding others, it's about understanding oneself. The speaker realizes how easily people are conditioned to fear what they do not know, how quickly assumptions harden into beliefs. And in that realization, there is humility, there is growth. There is a sense of being called to something deeper than comfort or opinion, a call to justice, to truth, to solidarity. This family, through their grace, did not just open their home. They opened a window into a different way of seeing the world. The speaker leaves Gaza not just changed, but awakened, with a heart no longer blind. What began as a journey into a place I barely understood, ended with a transformation I never expected. I went to Gaza thinking I would witness pain, and I did, but I also witnessed something far more powerful. I saw love in its rawest form. I saw faith standing tall in the rubble. I saw children who smiled through scars and families who gave without hesitation. I saw Islam not through politics or propaganda, but through kindness, through mercy, through hearts so full that they changed mine forever. This Muslim family in Gaza didn't just welcome me into their home, they welcomed me into a truth the world too often ignores. They taught me that strength is not in might, but in patience. That dignity is not found in wealth, but in unwavering faith. And that sometimes the people we think we're going to help are the ones who end up saving us. Their love, their resilience, their humanity, these are not things that war can destroy. These are the things that will one day rebuild the world. To every heart listening, may you carry this story with you, not just as a memory, but as a mirror. Reflect deeply, love freely, and judge less. May your path be guided by truth and your heart be moved by compassion. Thank you for giving your time, your attention, and your soul to this message. May peace find you, may faith guide you, and may love never leave you. Good luck on your journey, and thank you.